Evening everyone, and welcome back to King B's Daily RNS Podcast, where we go through a bit of the RNSs from the day, how the market reacted, and a few details about them. So starting up, HE1, 33% down the day, tail of two halves this RNS today. So they found a good reservoir, a stratigraphic section previously undrilled that they found, which is great. Helium concentrates up to 8,220 parts per million. An increase in normal readings. All sounds promising. However, previously in a podcast I talked about them calling TD late. I think a lot of people might have missed that in the last RNS, which I highlighted, which means that they've said they're going to suspend this for future operations. They want to drill deeper. So what I'm summarising really is that possibly there is helium underneath this early TD when they had a few well issues. They lost 18 metres worth of holes. So there's things that could happen in the future, but they're suspending, they're coming back later. We need to look at funding and making sure there's enough funding there because they've had a few overruns and other bits. So next up, POW, 1% up on the day, 100% owned uranium business, 1,012 kilometres squared of 17 properties. It's their Athabasca Basin soil geochemical samples to back up initial random gas sampling. So they're backing up their work up to 164 ppmu. Next up, TM1. We featured this before. It's a battery recycling business, and they have now increased 100 tonnes of feedstock, an increase in recycling production, and they're talking about this net black mass. They have also talked about the fact they have funding to see them through. They've got a convertible loan facility and 525,000 left from a shareholder of the business, which they can convert and turn into cash. So an interesting one really to start tracking, and we've featured it a few times with these RNSs. Next up, Music Magpie, MMAG, 23% up on the day. They've kind of reacted to possible rumours about this early discussions, and they've confirmed it. So they've had early discussions with BT Group and Aurelius Group for the entire share capital, but they do reiterate it's very early stage, and we know with these things it can go many different ways, but good to see the share price up 23% on the day. Next up, VLS. So an interesting one, this 59% down the day. They've got an offer of 0.25, so that's a significant discount to the start of the day, hence the drop in share price, 0.25 for 4.1 million shares, plus extra, should they need. They're talking about scaling the business up and having funding to do that. Lightrock are a private equity firm, so it'd be interesting to see how that progresses. Again, no matter if money comes into the business, it's how they use it, and if they can scale up, and what the future looks like for shareholders. Next up, a lot of excitement around, in our group especially, and on X and different platforms, ORR. So a really interesting one here. Now, I talk about a lot on these podcasts about financing. Financing is super important. And it looks like what they've done here is worked with BCM International. They've got an earn-in agreement. It's 81% up on the day and a heads of terms. And then they put out a second RNS. So there's one asset which is 92% owned currently. Another asset is 90% owned. So both are now in a earn-in agreement. One asset is going to have 50%, up to 50% buy-in from BCM. They're going to do work in Q1 2024 there. Then they've got another 1 million in from BCM up front, and then 4 million in exploration. So two assets of 4 million in exploration costs covered for 50% up to 50% interest. Now, there is a few little lines in this RNS about should they drop below 5%, but my true feeling is this is why it's a good funding agreement for this company, and shareholders rightly say there's a long way to go if you bought in ages ago, but it's a really good step forward, and I think it's good business. You know, they're getting 500k cash up front from one of their assets, 1 million upfront cash from their other asset, and then 4 million exploration. Yes, look, we could talk long term and talk about exploration costs in the future, and it's going to cost more than 4 million. We could talk about all that. However, what they're saying is there might be a dilutionary basis or some other terms to have BCM cover some other bits as well, so they can buy in more interest, which is great. So it sounds like a really good deal. Well done to the board of directors, and good for shareholders to see their share price up. Next up, we're going to look at ALK. So we've talked about this in previous podcasts. So they've got a lot going on. Feedstock for their one train out of 4. And now they've brought in Vicky Jekyll, great name, supply chain expert. And then, it links to previous announcements, really, doesn't it? So it seems like they're pushing forward with the business and bringing in the right people to see them through to what they need to do in the future. 6% up on the day. EQT. So there's a lot to unpick here, and it was quite a big RNS. But really, they're just refinancing the original agreement. They've got a 3 million advance, and they're going to try and reduce operating expenditure. They're going to repay the previous 900k balance to the previous one. They're talking about pipeline of business, but there's so much to unpick in that RNS. I think it needs a good read over to talk about how they're repaying all these different finances, which is good. They talk about the fact they're doing the right thing for the business, and I agree, but it needs to be used wisely now and to really bring in this pipeline into profit so that doesn't happen again with refinancing. Next up, BHL, 4% down the day. Interesting one, this one, because there's mixed grades, really. In previous podcasts, I talked about 2% lithium being good. And we've got a mixed bag here. 3.05, really good. 1.03, medium. 0.34, not brilliant. So it's one of those things about the whole asset, really, in economics and lots of different things. Not time for now, but it's one of those ones that we have to think about the asset on the whole. So you're going to get good and bad, and to focus in on the good to build the work from there. A lot of excitement around EEE at the moment, along with ORR in our group and on X and different platforms. It's an interesting one, 4% up on the day. And I talked about previously where it's all about true width and grade. You need both. If you have both, you're onto a winner. And it seems like they've got this. So 276 meters at 4.57 TiO2, 118.5 meters at 5.13, and 144.8 at 4.24. So, and that's titanium dioxide. An interesting one, really. And I think it's one of those ones that are nice to track and see how it gets on. Yes, it's in early stages, but seems like a good asset and good numbers coming out of it. So good luck to all shareholders on that one, and good to see the management doing a good job with that one. Next up, BMN. So a bit of a breakdown here. Now I looked at the market cap of BMN, and it's 36 million. Okay. Now when you equate that to what they've just brought into the business, so 21.3 million US to get 50% of BMN's Bushfield Vancham project, and it's bit where they basically that bit of BMN owns their vanadium processing plant. So if you think about 50%, so that equates just that part of the business at what, 42 million pounds, and their market cap is 36 million. So when you start breaking down the parts that BMN have, and I know it's had a bit of a long history here, really, but it seems like the board of directors are starting to turn things around. And it's an interesting one to look at for shareholders. And I wish them all the best, because it looks like they're starting to bring all the things together. There's another commitment to invest 7 to 10 million for recommissioning of the Kill 1. And it's an interesting one here. I think there's lots going on with BMN, and it's be a really interesting one to do some deep dive into, because the market cap does look low compared to what they're bringing in and what people are paying them for parts of their assets. Then they had a second RNS which said about consolidating and streamlining their business, and that really spoke about basically the previous RNS. And they're selling their stake in CellCube. It seems like they're really focusing on what they should be doing, which they should have done a long time ago. And it's really nice to see, again, a management team thinking about what they're doing and then pushing forward with the business in the right way. Good on them. Last up, Prem. So they talked about a lot in this RNS, and they're saying that they're definitely suspending, so they've confirmed that, to bring in this ball mill. They're doing inspections over the shutdown period. They're going to keep going with mining operations, and there's a Q&A which I think has just finished. It'd be interesting to see if all the questions were answered. That'd be a really interesting one. 4% down the day. And there's lots in that RNS can be interpreted in many ways. There's a wet season coming up, so it'd be interesting to see how Prem progress past November, December shutdown, when they talk about missing the deadlines anyway, what happens in January onwards. And I think basically the proof will come in January to see what they do next. No one knows, so it's all just opinion at this stage. All we can do is have hope that in January it will sort itself out and people can push forward and shareholders can rightfully have the share price up where it should be for the asset that Prem has. Right, thanks everyone. If you've enjoyed what you heard and you want more discussion about what's happening in the largest UK Telegram group around and research-focused debate, the link is in our details. Thanks everyone. Have an awesome evening and I'll see you tomorrow.